On July 24th, 2007, a 20-year-old category manager at a Canadian computer retailer stood in a parking lot in Richmond, British Columbia, held up a Sunbeam Tunic Tower CPU heatsink, and pressed record on a camera that did not belong to him. The camera had been borrowed from the son of the company's president. The video was shot in 240p, 4:3 aspect ratio, with no script, no lighting rig, and no particular expectation that anyone would watch it. It was uploaded to YouTube as NCIX Tech Tips No. 1. The category manager's name was Linus Sebastian. The company was NCIX, formerly known as Netlink Computer Inc., a computer hardware retailer headquartered a few minutes away on Mayfield Place in Richmond. That parking lot video was the first frame of something neither Sebastian nor NCIX understood yet. Within 6 years, Sebastian would leave the company, take 2 colleagues with him, and start a media business out of a 2-car garage in Surrey. Within a decade, that garage operation would grow to more than 100 employees and turn down a buyout offer, reportedly exceeding $100 million. Within the same decade, NCIX would file for bankruptcy with the Supreme Court of British Columbia. And within 11 years of that first upload, the personal data of 3.8 million NCIX customers, including plaintext credit card numbers, would be found for sale on Craigslist for $15,000. This is the story of how one company accidentally invented the future of tech media and then chose not to follow it. You're watching Tech District, where we take apart the companies that built the electronic world, down to the circuit board and the engineer who designed it. If the rise here turns out to be just as strange as the fall, subscribe and hit like, because this one earns it. To understand what Steve Wu built, you have to understand what British Columbia looked like for PC enthusiasts in the middle of the 1990s. The internet was arriving, but it had not yet arrived. If you wanted to build a computer in the Vancouver area, you drove. You drove to Bridgeport Road in Richmond, where a cluster of small, independently owned computer shops sold motherboards, RAM sticks, and processors out of storefronts that smelled like solder and cardboard. You drove to Broadway in Vancouver for another handful of shops. You compared prices by hand, on paper, or by calling ahead and hoping whoever answered the phone knew the current stock. The selection was limited by what each individual shop could afford to carry. There was no centralized Canadian marketplace for PC components. Newegg existed in the United States, but cross-border shipping added cost, delays, and the uncertainty of customs. Tiger Direct served Canadian customers, but its reputation among enthusiasts was mixed at best. For the serious builder in the Vancouver area, the one who wanted specific parts at competitive prices with knowledgeable service, the options in 1996 were thin. Steve Wu saw that gap. Wu was a Burnaby resident with years of professional experience in IT. He understood the supply chain from the manufacturer's side and the customer from the enthusiast's side. He knew that the people who built their own rigs were not casual shoppers. They were obsessive researchers who compared specifications across dozens of products, cross-referenced reviews on early internet forums, and would drive an hour across Metro Vancouver to save $15 on a stick of RAM. They wanted selection. They wanted transparency on pricing, and more than anything, they wanted to trust that the person selling them a motherboard actually understood what a Northbridge chipset did and could explain why one board was worth twice as much as another. Wu was that person. The culture of PC building in Canada in the mid-90s was still small enough that a single operator with deep product knowledge, competitive pricing, and a willingness to stock what the enthusiasts actually wanted could build a real business on word of mouth alone. On April 28, 1996, Wu registered Netlink Computer Inc. and opened a single walk-in retail outlet. The store was modest. The inventory was focused on the components that serious builders needed: processors, motherboards, memory, storage, cooling, cases, and power supplies. The bet was simple. Serve the enthusiast, earn the trust, and let word of mouth do the rest. It worked. Within a year, Wu launched a website, extending NCIX's reach beyond Metro Vancouver and into the rest of Canada. American customers found it too. The site was functional rather than elegant, but it did the one thing that mattered. It listed thousands of components, showed prices, and let people order from anywhere with a shipping address. By the late 90s, Netlink Computer Inc. had quietly rebranded to the shorter, punchier NCIX, reflecting the shift toward e-commerce alongside its physical roots. Then came the price-matching policy, and it changed the company's trajectory. NCIX told its customers, in effect, that if they could find a lower price at any Canadian competitor, NCIX would match it. For the enthusiast community, this was a covenant. It meant you could do all your research, find the cheapest listing on any rival site, bring that number to NCIX, and walk away with the part at the lower price combined with NCIX's faster shipping and more knowledgeable staff. Customers did not just buy from NCIX. They evangelized it. Forums filled with posts advising newcomers to price match everything through NCIX and skip the competitors entirely. One longtime customer later recalled that he had purchased nearly every component in every PC he built from 2002 onward through NCIX, and he still had the original 80GB IDE hard drive with an NCIX label on it from his first order. That kind of loyalty was not purchased. It was earned, one transaction at a time. Wu expanded the corporate structure as the business grew. Netlink Computer Inc. became the parent of two operating corporations, NX Source Technology Inc. and B&D Technology Inc., which together ran a family of retail and online banners. Direct Canada offered a narrower product selection at lower baseline prices. Best Direct and CompuTwo rounded out the portfolio. The strategy was deliberate. If a frustrated customer boycotted one banner, they often ended up shopping at another without realizing it was the same parent company. Revenue grew steadily through the early 2000s, driven by the kind of grassroots loyalty that no advertising budget can replicate. But price matching and selection were table stakes. What separated NCIX from the dozens of other small Canadian PC retailers that rose and fell during the same period was simple endurance. The early 2000s were brutal for computer shops. Margins on individual components were razor thin, sometimes as low as a few dollars per part after shipping and overhead. An earlier, unrelated company, also called Canada Computer, went out of business around 2004. Other local shops along Bridgeport Road in Richmond shuttered one by one, unable to sustain the overhead on shrinking margins. The arrival of Newegg's massive American catalog put constant downward pressure on pricing, and any Canadian retailer that could not match that scale had to compensate with service, speed, or selection. NCIX survived by doing two things well: maintaining a website that enthusiasts trusted as the default first stop for any build, and opening physical stores in locations where foot traffic justified the rent. By the mid-2000s, NCIX had retail outlets across the Vancouver area, in Vancouver itself, Burnaby, Coquitlam, Richmond, and Langley, each serving a different slice of the metro region. The stores gave customers a place to pick up online orders, inspect components before buying, and speak with staff who could discuss the merits of one graphics card over another from experience rather than a spec sheet. This was not a given. Many online retailers treated their physical presence as a costly afterthought. NCIX treated its stores as something closer to community hubs, places where the enthusiast culture that sustained the business could be maintained face to face. Meanwhile, in Ladner, British Columbia, a teenager named Linus Sebastian was developing the exact kind of obsessive interest in PC hardware that NCIX's entire business model depended on. Sebastian, born August 20th, 1986, enrolled at the University of British Columbia, but dropped out before completing a degree. What he did instead was walk into the NCIX retail store in Langley and start working weekends as a part-time sales representative. Within a few months, he became the store's top seller of high-end gaming systems, a performance that startled people who had been there far longer. The company's president noticed and invited Sebastian to the Richmond head office, where he was asked to manage system configurations on the NCIX website. Sebastian threw himself into the role. He took over water cooling parts, then RAM, SSDs, motherboards, and networking, and his work helped NCIX become the top seller of water cooling components in Canada. By 2007, he held the title of category manager. He was 20 years old, had no media training, no degree, and no ambitions beyond being very good at selling computer parts. He was about to become the most consequential person at the company, for a reason nobody at NCIX anticipated. The decision to create a YouTube channel was not a stroke of genius. It was defensive. By 2007, competitors like Tiger Direct and Newegg were both producing online video content to market their products, and NCIX's leadership recognized that falling behind on this front risked losing visibility with the enthusiast audience that kept the business alive. The company asked Sebastian to host the channel. He was not chosen because he was a trained presenter or because he had a broadcasting background. He was chosen because he knew the products better than almost anyone else in the building. He was willing to do it, and he was already on payroll. The resources were minimal. Sebastian worked with one cameraman and one editor, neither credited publicly. The camera was borrowed from the president's son. There was no studio. There was a parking lot, a folding table, and whatever product needed a video that day. Sebastian later recalled that in the early period, he would go out to the parking lot and shoot 10 videos at a time, grinding through the backlog with an efficiency that was more assembly line than broadcast production. The first upload, that Sunbeam Tunic Tower video, was a young man who clearly knew the hardware, explaining how to install it, nothing more. The channel grew, but slowly, and the cost of production relative to the viewership made the leadership uneasy. Rather than shut it down, NCIX made a decision that would prove far more consequential than any store lease or warehouse contract it would ever sign. The company told Sebastian to create a second, separate channel. The logic was practical. On this new channel, Sebastian could produce content faster at lower cost with lower production values and without the NCIX brand directly attached. If the quality dipped or Sebastian said something unexpected, the company would be insulated. The new channel would serve as a pressure valve, absorbing the creative risk that NCIX's leadership did not want on its flagship. On November 24, 2008, Sebastian created that second channel. He called it Linus Tech Tips. NCIX treated it as a minor line item, a marketing experiment running in the background, while the real business of selling components and opening stores continued in the foreground. It was, in retrospect, the single most valuable thing the company ever produced. But the company that produced it would never understand that. The forces that would eventually dismantle NCIX were already in motion by the time Linus Tech Tips went live, though none of them looked fatal yet. Amazon was expanding into Canada with logistics infrastructure that dwarfed anything a regional retailer could build, warehouses the size of airplane hangars, same-week delivery that no 12-store chain could match, and the willingness to operate at a loss for years to capture market share. Newegg had the American enthusiast market locked down and was pushing its Canadian presence with the kind of pricing and selection that came from continental scale. The broader consumer market was shifting beneath the entire industry. The era of the hobbyist who bought individual components, followed a build guide, and spent a weekend assembling a PC from scratch was not disappearing, but it was contracting. The customers replacing those hobbyists were younger, often gamers, often with relatively high disposable incomes, and they increasingly preferred to buy complete systems from brands they recognized, machines that arrived assembled, tested, and warrantied, ready to play on day one. Charlie Shy, who worked at NCIX as a product manager and watched the transition from the inside, would later put it plainly. The custom PC scene in Vancouver, and in Canada as a whole, had always struggled to keep up with the United States and Asian markets. The number of people willing to build their own hardware was dwindling, not growing. At the same time, YouTube was becoming something that nobody in the retail industry had prepared for. A single person with a camera, a personality, and deep product knowledge could build an audience larger than any storefront could attract in a year. The economics were inverted. A physical retail store paid rent every month, whether customers walked in or not. A YouTube channel cost almost nothing to operate and scaled without limit. The more videos Sebastian uploaded, the more subscribers arrived, and the more subscribers arrived, the more leverage he commanded with the brands whose products he reviewed. The audience relationship was personal. People did not subscribe to NCIX Tech Tips because they loved NCIX. They subscribed because they liked the way Linus Sebastian explained things. If Sebastian left, the audience would follow him, not the logo. This was the structural reality that NCIX never fully reckoned with. It was not hidden. It was not subtle. It was standing in the parking lot, filming 10 videos in a row, building an audience that would eventually dwarf the company paying his salary. But for a few years, between roughly 2009 and 2013, none of that seemed to matter, because NCIX was expanding faster than it ever had, and the numbers still looked like growth. The company pushed east, opening retail outlets in Ontario, in Markham, Mississauga, Scarborough, Toronto, and Ottawa. It built shipping facilities to serve the new geography, one in Markham and another across the border in the United States. On September 16, 2011, NCIX officially opened a 45,000 square foot distribution center in City of Industry, California, its first American warehouse. Steve Wu, still serving as president, described it as the natural next step. Taryn Tong, the general manager overseeing the expansion, framed it as bringing NCIX's community-driven culture to American customers. At its peak, NCIX operated 12 retail stores and 3 distribution centers spanning 2 countries. The NCIX Tech Tips YouTube channel crossed 1 million subscribers. Netlink to Daily, the channel's daily tech news show, had built a loyal audience that tuned in every weekday. Sebastian himself was producing content at a pace that bordered on compulsive 45 videos a month, sometimes more, and his personal channel, Linus Tech Tips, was growing alongside it. In early 2012, Sebastian and a colleague named Luc Lafreniere launched Tech Quickie, a channel delivering short-form tech explanations. In 2010, Sebastian was formally promoted to business unit manager at NCIX. The ecosystem around him was expanding: the NCIX flagship channel, the Linus offshoot, the Tech Quickie spin-off, the daily news show. All of it ran through NCIX's orbit, powered by NCIX's product access, filmed with NCIX's resources. There is a number that tells the whole story in miniature, and NCIX never published it, but anyone paying attention could see it. By 2012, Linus Tech Tips, the cheaper offshoot built to protect the NCIX brand from reputational risk, was outgrowing the parent channel in subscribers, in views per video, and in the kind of audience engagement that advertisers pay a premium for. The thing NCIX had created to absorb risk was becoming more popular than the thing it was designed to protect. Subscribers who discovered NCIX Tech Tips through Linus's personal channel cared about Linus, not about NCIX. The brand equity was accumulating in the wrong place from the company's perspective, and nobody in a position of authority appeared to notice, or if they did notice, nobody acted on it. NCIX continued to invest in storefronts, lease agreements, warehouse space, and the physical infrastructure of a traditional retailer. Every dollar that went into a new retail location in Ontario was a dollar that did not go into content production, audience development, or the kind of direct-to-consumer relationship that Sebastian was proving could be built for almost nothing. The company that had accidentally invented Tech YouTube was still running itself like a chain of hardware stores. It did not invest in the thing that was making it famous. It did not own the thing that was making it famous. And in early 2013, the person who made it famous decided it was time to leave. Linus Sebastian left NCIX in early 2013 through a negotiated agreement. He took the Linus Tech Tips channel with him, along with its trademark and its growing subscriber base. He also took people. Luc Lafreniere, who had co-created Tech Quickie with Sebastian while they were both still at NCIX, left the company to join him. Edsel Yago, an editor who had worked alongside Sebastian on NCIX content, came too. Together with Brandon Lee, they incorporated a Linus Media Group in October of 2012 and formally launched operations in January 2013 from Sebastian's two-car garage in Surrey, British Columbia. Sebastian's wife, Yvonne Ho, handled the finances. The entire operation began with a handful of people, a garage, and a YouTube channel that Sebastian had built on someone else's dime with a borrowed camera. He continued producing videos for NCIX Tech Tips on contract, appearing on the channel through the end of 2015, which gave the transition a veneer of continuity. But the substance of the relationship had changed. Sebastian was no longer an NCIX employee building the company's audience. He was an independent creator, lending his face to a former employer, while building his own empire in a garage down the road. NCIX, meanwhile, did not course correct. The company's response to losing its most recognizable personality was not to rethink its media strategy or invest in audience development, or hire someone equally compelling to fill the void. The response was to continue doing what it had been doing, opening stores, managing inventory, and competing on price in a market where the price advantage was disappearing. The Ontario expansion, which had added retail locations in Markham, Mississauga, Scarborough, Toronto, and Ottawa, was expensive. Each store meant lease payments, staff, utilities, and inventory. Overhead in a province where NCIX had far less brand recognition than it enjoyed in British Columbia. The U.S. Distribution Center in City of Industry, California, was another fixed cost in a market where NCIX was a footnote next to Amazon and Newegg. The company was spending money on infrastructure designed for a version of the business that was already obsolete. Former employees would later describe a leadership culture that resisted change, that saw online retail as a complement to physical stores rather than a replacement for them, and that never fully grasped how thoroughly the economics of the industry had shifted. You can read that decision two ways. One reading says NCIX was run by people who had built their careers in physical retail and could not see past it. The other says the math of Canadian tech retail was simply unsustainable for a company of NCIX's size, and no strategic pivot could have saved it once Amazon arrived in force. Honest history holds both readings at once. The closures began in the summer of 2017, and once they started, they did not stop. In July, NCIX shut down its retail locations in Mississauga, Toronto, and Ottawa, and closed its Markham, Ontario headquarters office. Customer service response times stretched from hours to days. Orders went unfulfilled. On Reddit, in the Build APC Sales Canada subreddit, an anonymous former employee posting under the name XNCX began sharing insider details about the company's deteriorating operations, confirming what customers were already suspecting. The company was running out of money. In September, NCIX announced a restructuring plan, under which it would abandon physical retail and focus entirely on online sales. It was the right idea, years too late. In November, the remaining British Columbia stores fell. Vancouver, Burnaby, and Coquitlam all closed their doors. Canada Computers, an Ontario-based competitor, announced it had taken over the leases on those locations. On November 30th, the last NCIX retail store, located inside Lansdowne Mall in Richmond, closed for good. Only the company's headquarters on Mayfield Place in Richmond remained occupied, and not for long. On December 1st, 2017, Netlink Computer Inc. filed for bankruptcy with the Supreme Court of British Columbia, under file number 17008-6. After 21 years and 7 months, NCIX was dead. Approximately 115 employees lost their jobs. The NCIX Tech Tips channel, still carrying over 1 million subscribers and nearly 300 million views across more than 2,000 videos, went silent. NetLinked Daily, the daily news show that had been a staple of the channel for years, simply stopped. Riley Murdoch, the last host, confirmed there would be no more episodes. Customers with outstanding orders were advised to file chargebacks with their financial institutions because NCIX could no longer process refunds. The website remained technically online, a ghost storefront accepting orders it could never fill. The bankruptcy was not the final indignity. That came 8 months later. In February and April of 2018, Able Auctions conducted a pair of liquidation sales at NCIX's former warehouse and headquarters in Richmond. Everything went on the block: desks, chairs, cubicles, server racks, conveyor systems, packaging equipment, and roughly $400,000 in remaining inventory. Bargain hunters and tech enthusiasts picked through what was left of a 21-year-old company. Boxes of confidential documents sat in the open, supplier invoices, telephone records, and credit applications for NCIX customers, some marked with signs reading "to be shredded." Computers on the warehouse floor were still logged in to NCIX's internal systems. Nobody appeared to be paying attention to the data. Then, on August 1st, 2018, a cybersecurity researcher named Travis Doring of Privacy Fly, a Vancouver-based security firm, was browsing Craigslist when he noticed an ad from Richmond listing NCIX database servers for sale. Doring contacted the seller, a man who identified himself only as Jeff, and arranged to meet at a warehouse. What Doring found there was staggering: 18 Dell PowerEdge servers from NCIX's server farm, 300 desktop computers, and 109 hard drives that had been removed from servers before the auction. None of them had been wiped. The servers contained plaintext credit card data for approximately 260,000 people, purchase records for 385,000 shoppers, and a total of 3.8 million Canadian customer records spanning the entire life of the company. Employee records were there too, including social insurance numbers. Jeff told Doring he had already sold copies of the data to at least one overseas buyer for $15,000 per package. He offered Doring the same deal. NCIX, it turned out, had never encrypted any of its databases. When the company went bankrupt, it abandoned its server hardware at the warehouse. The landlord owed roughly $150,000 in unpaid rent, sold the equipment to an auction house to recover what he could. The data went with it. Richmond RCMP seized the servers after Doring published his findings, and the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner of British Columbia opened an investigation. A class action lawsuit followed. One security researcher called it one of the most egregious data breaches ever recorded, not because the data was hacked, but because it was simply sold, unsecured, to whoever showed up with cash. While NCIX's customer data was circulating on the second-hand market, Linus Media Group was doing something NCIX never could. It was growing. By 2026, the company employed roughly 120 people. It had moved out of the garage, then out of a converted house, and into a purpose-built facility. The Linus Tech Tips channel had accumulated over 16 million subscribers and more than 9 billion views. In May of 2023, Sebastian received a buyout offer, reportedly exceeding $100 million, with 60% cash and 40% equity in the acquiring company. He turned it down. He stepped aside as CEO that same year, and the person he chose to replace him was Taryn Tong, the same man who had been general manager at NCIX during its U.S. expansion, the same man Sebastian had once reported to. Tong had gone on to work at Corsair Gaming and Dell before circling back to the world Sebastian had built. The irony was not lost on anyone paying attention. After the bankruptcy, Sebastian tried to purchase the orphaned NCIX Tech Tips YouTube channel, hoping to revive at least the net-linked Daily Show under its original banner. He could not close the deal. Instead, he hired Riley Murdoch, the last host of NetLinked Daily, and launched a spiritual successor called TechLinked. The NCIX Tech Tips channel remains on YouTube to this day, an archive with over 1 million subscribers, still accumulating views on videos made by people who no longer work for a company that no longer exists. On July 24, 2007, a category manager held up a Sunbeam Tunic Tower CPU heatsink in a parking lot in Richmond and pressed record. That video is still online. The channel it belongs to is still there, orphaned, its subscriber count slowly declining as YouTube's algorithm forgets what NCIX was. The man who held that heatsink now runs a company with 120 employees, turned down over $100 million, and hired his old boss as CEO. The company that put the camera in his hands, that told him to stand in the parking lot and explain what a heatsink does, is gone. It stores our Canada Computers locations now. Its warehouse is empty. Its customer data was sold for the price of a used car. NCIX did not fail because it made bad products or cheated its customers or ran out of things to sell. It failed because it could not see that its most valuable asset was never the inventory, the storefronts, or the price-matching algorithm. It was the audience. NCIX didn't just launch Linus Tech Tips. It proved that the future of tech retail was content, community, and trust, and then chose to open more stores instead. If you ever bought a part from NCIX, built a PC with their components, or watched Linus back when he was shooting heatsink demos in the parking lot in Richmond, drop a comment below. Tell us the part, the year, and whether it still runs. The people who built these machines and kept this company alive for 21 years know more about what was lost than the people who let it go. Subscribe to Tech District, because we have the story of another company that built something the world couldn't live without and then vanished, and you will not want to miss how it ends.